Beep.
Dash, how about that? I'm blocking you. You're nobody. How about that, Dash? Put this on your
Oh, naughty word.
YouTube. Okay?
Look at it, Tom. I don't need to make anything. I don't need to portray it as evil. I don't need to do any work.
I don't want to hear like the John Lee stuff. I just like I want to hear some actual substance. I don't want to hear like you're like, oh, I'm above this. I don't care about all that garbage.
No, you're not even listening to what I'm saying. So I think that if I just shed light on that, I think it's evident to all that their views are abhorrent. They're dark, they're evil, they're sinful, and I don't think it's wrong to shed light on that. I think it's not a disservice whatsoever. I think if I would not be fearful that some people might be attracted to that darkness. I don't have that fear. I think that a light is a good disinfectant. That's sort of a cliche, but I agree with that. And so I don't have a problem, allowing such a person to be seen or heard. I don't have a problem because I think that rational people will understand that it's abhorrent and wrong.
Yeah, so me personally, like I'm not really sort of on the sort of like no platforming people at all.
Yeah, and I'm in agreement with you actually.
Yeah, but I'm not. We're probably a different. Look, it's going to be a spectrum, and I don't think we're in the same level. I am sympathetic to it in some instances. I mean, actually, like Matt Dillahunty, like when he tweeted about Khalil, if you notice, he wrote, God, hold on, let me look up the hashtag. He did a hashtag.
Like no names for perpetrators or something like that.
Yeah, I want to just get it exactly right. Hashtag not naming predator.
Oh, I think I get what you mean. Like don't even dignify it by mentioning the person. Something like that?
I think the idea is to not like give them attention because like they want it.
Like recognition or something
But
like that?
I don't think in this case Khalil don't want any of that attention. So I don't.
Yeah, I actually think Matt should have used his name.
I think so too.
I mean, he didn't. Well, his previous tweets about Khalil were just the opposite. He actually said, he said he wanted me to make him infamous, and I'll be happy to, or something like that. So.
Well, that seems inconsistent.
Well, I would agree. Maybe he's changed his position.
Sounds like virtue signaling to me, if anything.
John, do you denounce what Khalil did?
Yeah, why would I condone such an act?
I just had to ask, man.
He didn't ask you if. No. Now you're being cagey. He didn't ask you if you condone an act. He asked you if you denounce an act.
Yeah, did you?
And you responded with some bullshit.
No. Did you hear me respond by answering his question yes, and then I proceeded?
Well, that sense.
That was a verbal tick, yeah. That was absolutely a verbal tick, yeah.
Because if
you always answer with yeah as a verbal tick.
Yeah, but he's not being consistent.
Well, the answer would be yes. How about that?
He's not.
And then you could add in what I said anyway.
You're a little quiet, Jack.
Yeah, he's not being consistent because if it is the case that Khalil sexually abused a child or what have you, then for John that would be in all things considered good.
Here we go with that angle. That's what you keep saying.
That's correct. That's right. That's right.
How I would respond, right, is this scripture says, "Woe to those," meaning you, Jack, who call evil good and good evil.
Yeah, it's no rebuttal.
Sufficient for me.
Yeah, well, just to say no rebuttal.
Great. Yeah. So
John's
my
view,
position is that act is evil, and you could pretend
but not
it's
evil
not.
not evil in the sense that it ought not have occurred.
Yeah. So you
right?
could spin it any way
not
you
evil
want,
in
Jack.
the sense, not evil in the sense that God ought not have determined it to occur.
Evil in a sense when it is judged, God, if righteous, if just, will weigh it and understand that it's wanting and that it is evil. And God can only do that in a holy and righteous and moral way if he declares that action to be evil. If he declares it to be good, then there's no justice required for such an action and so
Is
forth.
that contradicting what I said?
So therefore, it is evil, and it will always remain evil. There's no scenario by which it magically turns it into good.
Yeah, I don't understand why you think that by equivocating, you're somehow contradicting what I'm saying.
Because you said I consider it good, and I do not.
Yeah, so do you think it ought to have been done?
Yeah, once again, it's irrelevant. I've mentioned numerous times whether it ought to have been done or ought not to have occurred or whatever language you want to know, has no bearing whatsoever on whether it is good or evil. I don't know how many times I've said that.
Yeah, but in the sense of good, which means ought to be done, it's good in that sense, right?
Just because God permits it doesn't make it good.
Well, God
Just
does more
because
than
God
permits.
does not allow it does not
Wait a
make
minute.
it evil. It's as simple as
If
that.
God permits it, that means it's permissible. It's morally permissible.
No, that's
right?
that's what Dartharianus is trying to argue. And so there's a conflation of permissibility as if permissibility represents moral acceptability. No, it does not. It does not represent that.
But how is it that you're not equivocating there?
You guys are the ones equivocating when you try to say the things that God permits is permissible. No, it's not. It's not what. There's two different senses of permission there, and you guys are trying to make it the same.
I'm using only one sense.
Yeah, there's only one sense. Therefore, because God permits, in that sense, the permissibility of the action has no bearing whatsoever in that one sense.
I'm saying, right, that God, in virtue of being perfectly good, can't permit impermissible things.
Says who?
It's just analytic.
So, what you're doing, in essence, right, you're assigning the permissibility by what's permitted, and this is what I don't know how many times I've said this, right? The moral, whether it's moral or not, right or wrong, good or evil, has absolutely no bearing on the permissibility of God or the lack thereof. The permission of God, actually, I'm sorry.
You're just equivocating.
Yeah, and so I've explained this already simply, Jack. But so
look,
it seems like you're trying to have a drumbeat
you haven't contradicted
of your dishonesty.
Anything.
I mean,
you haven't contradicted anything that I've said.
Of course, I
dismiss
what you said.
Yeah, but all you mean by dismiss it is say, well, if I interpret the words you've said in a way where they don't mean what I've intended them to mean, then I don't agree with them.
I mean, it's not very difficult. Just because God permits, a person to feed the homeless, it doesn't make feeding the homeless good. Just because God permits someone to kill the homeless doesn't make it good either. And so the question of whether feeding the homeless or killing the homeless, the goodness or evilness of these acts, right, has absolutely nothing to do with whether God permits it or not.
You're just equivocating.
And so it's as simple as that.
Yeah, it's simple that if you equivocate on what I've said, you can consistently reject what I've said, right? But that's not contradicting what I've said. Because what I've said, right, isn't what you're rejecting.
Are you claiming, Jack, that good and evil is dependent upon God's permission in any way, form, or fashion?
Absolutely.
Yeah, and I claim that it's not.
Yeah, but you are just equivocating.
And so let me get this straight, Jack. That if you feed the homeless and God permits it, it is good in virtue of not that act, but in virtue of God's permission. Therefore, it's good. And equally so, that in your world, right, where God permits someone to kill the homeless, that also, in your view, represents that it is good in virtue of God permitting it. Therefore, both these actions are whether they're good or evil are established by God's permission, and not whether these acts in and of themselves are good or evil. Is that correct, Jack?
Well, that's your view. We're talking about your
No, it's
view.
not my view.
No,
It's my
when
view.
you say
It's my
when you
view,
say
and I told you
when
my
you
view.
say it's
But it's
not
my
your
view
view.
that hang on, sir. It is my view that the whether these acts are evil has absolutely no bearing on whether God permits it or not. And
Yeah.
we can see that feeding the homeless, for example, can be understood by that act in and of itself, and killing the homeless can be viewed based upon the prescriptive will of God, and therefore, the prescriptive will of God establishes whether they are good or evil, not the permissive will of God.
Yeah, that's equivocating. So you haven't contradicted anything that I've said.
You haven't refuted anything I've said. All you do is blurt out equivocation.
Well, I correctly described your view.
Yeah, that's a claim.
Right. And then when you described your view, you
equivocated
on the words that I used, right?
Yeah, these are all just claims,
and therefore
baseless
committed
claims,
a fallacy
Jack.
of equivocation in rejecting what I said about your view.
Yeah, you misrepresent my view. It's as simple as that.
No, there's no misrepresentation because all you do is equivocate.
That's a claim.
Yeah, it's absolutely a claim.
A baseless claim.
And have you established that it's baseless?
Yeah, by the fact you haven't supported it.
That doesn't show that it's baseless.
Yeah, it does.
No, it doesn't. Baseless means it doesn't have any support. But the fact that I didn't support the claim doesn't mean that it doesn't have support.
To me, when a person makes a baseless claim, it represents to me that they have not supported it. Not that there is no support, but that they haven't supported it.
No, I'm talking about, I asked you whether there's no support for it.
So
right?
can it be possibly understood? Can baseless possibly understood as has not been supported rather than cannot be supported? Because that's the way I understand it, as the former,
Well, then
not
you're
the
just
latter.
equivocating.
On baseless, if I'm defining my terms, there's no equivocation. You're trying to prescribe certain words to your own definitions, and rather than allowing your interlocutor to define their own terms and to see if they're consistent within their own terms, you don't even attempt to do that. It's kind of like the atheism debate, It's like, no, like Steve McCrae said, no, it has to be this way. Like this is what atheism means. You're just equivocating.
Yeah, I don't see the relevance of any of this. Right? I said
it's a
that on
boring
your
conversation. You get triggered all the time. I mean, you jump out. You just it's just a broken record at this point. Honestly, Jack, it's just a broken record.
Yeah. So either way, right? I when I say that on your view, if Khalil sexually abused a child, that's in all things considered good, right? You haven't done anything to contradict that claim.
So the way I characterize it, Jack, all things considered, a good will result from it. That does not necessitate that all things considered, that good will result from it represents that all things considered, that in and of itself is good. There's a big difference.
That's just to equivocate on the language.
And as many times as you scream equivocation on that, it's really no effective as far as my position goes.
You haven't done anything to contradict the position.
Yeah, I would contend that I have, and
No, all you've done is relabel. All you've done is relabel what all things considered good means.
yeah, I've already
Right,
explained
and
it.
say all things considered
I've already
good.
explained
It's
it, Jack.
things
Right.
considered good.
So in other words, I will say this, right? All summations that are considered are positive numbers, integers, right? Now, what you're saying, that's a statement. And so what I'm saying is that does not necessitate that individual numbers within that equation are quote unquote all things considered good. All things considered represents a summation, right, of all the numbers. So what I do say is this -3 there, it is negative. It will always remain negative. And you want to come in and say, oh, all things considered, this -3 is positive. And that's where your sophistry begins, Jack. Because what I'm saying is that all
Can
things
you just shut
considered,
up already, John? Holy shit.
the summation is positive. You're trying to come in here to say that -3, all things considered, quote unquote, is positive. Well, that would be false.
I didn't say anything about
That's
numbers.
exactly what you're saying. You're saying that that particular thing of consideration, in and of itself, is quote unquote all things considered good, when all things considered represents a summation, a right side of the equation, so to speak. And so what you're talking about is individual things in and of themselves as being all things considered. There is no all things considered with that. And so what you're trying to label, Jack, which is evil, you're trying to pretend that all things considered, quote unquote, is good when it does not even represent my position whatsoever. All
I
things
didn't say
considered
anything
good,
about numbers.
all things considered good is the right side of the equation. So what we see, what we are considering, right, is all of the positive and negative things are being added together. And so we see the summation. And so we say that all things considered, this sum right here is good. And so, yes, I do stand by, after all things considered, that this summation is positive. It's good, right? But you're trying to say these individual integers are all of these things that are considered are good, and that's not correct at all. And I've already explained it to you numerous times on what you're doing.
Sorry, am I audible?
Absolutely no substantive reply to what I just said.
You weren't, but
All
you
right.
are now, Jack. You weren't before.
I didn't say anything about numbers or equations or anything like that. So I don't know what the
Is
relevance
it
of that is.
disanalogous, Jack?
I didn't say anything about it, so I don't know why you're saying
So would
anything
you like
about
to
it.
reply to it?
What is there to reply to? I didn't say anything
Well,
about numbers, so I don't see
I'll tell
how
you
any of
what.
that is relevant.
I'll tell you what. If all things considered is not representative summation, if I provided this analogy, I'd like to hear what the disanalogy is.
I didn't say anything about numbers.
Is it analogous?
How would I know? I have no idea what the analogy is supposed to be.
I just provided it to you. As
Did
far as
anybody
what all
understand
things
what he
considered,
was saying?
all things considered is representative of a summation of all things considered, of which that particular action is only a part of all that's considered, right? And so what I'm trying to say is you're trying to say that the part is constitutes all things considered. No, it does not. It's not rocket science. That part is either good or evil,
I
positive or
didn't say
negative,
anything about
right?
parts.
Yeah. And so I am. And so what you're trying to do,
I
Jack,
don't know
right?
what you think a part has to do with anything here.
So like I said, I've already responded. If you don't want to engage my response to you in a substantive way, you can just You can just bury your face in the sand, put your hands to your
How
ears,
could I
and say it's
engage with something?
equivocation.
How
It's
could I engage with
equivocation.
something I don't
Numbers are
understand?
not relevant. Numbers are not
Does anybody
relevant. It's
understand what he's talking
equivocation.
about?
You've not responded, and you can
Does
say that
anybody
all day long.
understand
No,
what
It's
he's
not at
talking
all.
about?
equivocation.
Is there anybody here who understands what he's talking about?
Not me.
Yeah, so, again, on your view, if Khalil raped a child, that's in all things considered good, because on your view, everything
That's
that
not correct.
occurs,
Yeah, I don't know how many times I tell you no.
everything that occurs is in all things considered good.
Evil, after all things are considered, is still evil, sir. It will always remain evil after all the considerations.
Yeah, so if we understand,
Right? There's nothing by which that makes that evil good magically.
if we understand evil as in all things considered bad, right, then on your view, there's no such thing as evil.
Evil is. It is bad, right?
Yeah, if
Does
we
that
understand
mean
evil, as an all things considered bad, right? There's no such thing as evil on your view, because everything that occurs is in all things considered good.
No. What I understand is that all things considered, this particular sin is evil. However, with the consideration of that what we're looking at the end result, right? That end result is part of the summation of the evil, certainly, but it's still good. So we're looking at two different things here. We're looking at the parts that are being added, and we're looking at the whole. And so I don't know if you're committing a composition fallacy or what in an actual way, but to me, you're trying to make the part as some sort of whole, or all things considered. I don't think that's the proper way to look at it. I think that when we say all things considered good, we're not looking at that part at all. All things considered, the result, the final result, the end result of all things, which of this particular evil is part of that consideration. And so what we do say is not that part is good. That's what you're trying to do. That's what I've told you that you've been trying to do. You're obstinate in understanding it. You're pretending that it's not understandable, not comprehensible. But I've explained to you numerous times, of which you don't even want to address.
Okay, so did God determine, if, let's say that Khalil raped a child, did God determine him to do that?
Let's say that Khalil what?
Raped a child. Did God determine him to do that?
Yeah, he causally determined for those events to come to pass.
Right. Did he have all things considered reason to do so?
Yeah, he had certainly reason to permit evil. And so there's
Did
no
he have
reason.
all things considered? I didn't ask you that.
Well, I'm telling you
so
that.
So did he? Yeah. So I'm asking you a simple question. It's a yes or no question. Did he have all things considered reason? Okay. So he had. Shut your mouth. Shut your mouth.
To permit
Shut
evil.
your mouth.
You seem to have a problem with that statement.
Mods.
You seem to have a problem with the statement.
God
had reason.
Yeah, I have a problem with you fucking over talking me. I have a problem with you fucking over talking me.
God has reason to permit evil.
Are you gonna stop over talking me?
Would you like to repeat after me, Jack?
Are you gonna stop over talking me?
Good reason to permit evil. Can you repeat after me?
Yeah. So, how are you understanding evil there? Is you understanding evil as that which ought not be permitted?
No, not at all.
Are you understanding evil to mean?
Not at all.
Yeah. So that's not what I'm talking. That's not what I'm talking about.
So you're shit. Now you're just creating little idiosyncratic views of what permission represents in that particular discussion or consideration.
No, I'm not creating any.
You asked me a question. I said no.
Right.
What's the problem with that?
Yeah. So I'm not talking about evil in that sense, dumb shit. Which is why I said you were equivocating, you fucking dumb fuck.
I would say you're the one equivocating, right? Jack, and you're caught red-handed every time.
So in the sense, of evil, shut your mouth.
And all
Shut
you
your
can
mouth.
do is
Shut
repeat
your
yourself
mouth.
like a parrot.
Shut
Well,
your
that's
mouth.
equivocation.
Shut your
Shut
mouth.
him up.
Shut
Shut
your
him up.
mouth.
This is
Shut your mouth.
equivocation. It's
Shut your mouth.
equivocation. It's equivocation.
Are you going to stop over talking me? Yeah. So again, if we understand evil in terms of what's impermissible, right, which is to say that which ought not be done, right, it's not evil on your view, you fucking idiot. So yeah, if you equivocate on evil and have it mean some other fucking thing, right, like chocolate cake, right, then obviously it's not evil in that sense. Or sorry, it is evil in that sense, right? But in the sense that I mean, where it's impermissible, right, which is to say it ought not be done, right, which is to say it ought not be permitted, right, then obviously it's not evil on your fucking view, you fucking idiot. It's in all things considered good on your view. We understand good as normative, which is what God ought to do. Fucking
You leave?
idiot.
It's good under your worldview.
Yeah. So did I say something you disagreed with there, John? Yeah. Yeah, so my point stands that John's view is that if Khalil raped a child, that's in all things considered good.
Actually, no. My position is that it's evil.
Yeah.
However, all things considered, right? With that action being a part of the totality of actions, right? There will be good that results from that part, which we understand is evil. And so,
Yeah.
all things considered, good will result. Is not the case that all things considered that particular action, just because it's part of an equation, does not represent that it's
Yeah, but God's plan is good, right?
God's plan is good. That's correct. And so
Right, and
God.
that's part of God's plan, right?
So in other words, the
God's
summation,
plan is
right?
good.
So the
That's part of His
summation,
plan. Therefore, that's
right?
good.
So no, that's not true, Tom. I'll give you an example. If you say the summation is positive, right, does not mean that integer is positive.
No, I'm not talking about
But
the
you
act
want to
itself.
say, or
I'm
at least
talking about.
Jack wants to say, all
No, I'm
things
not. I'm explicitly
considered,
saying that's
all
not,
things
right? I'm saying that
considered.
it's
You
good
want to say,
with
all things
regards
considered, that
to
integer is
all
positive,
things
Tom. You
considered
don't see
good.
that?
It's good with regards to being
You
part of
don't
God's
see that,
plan.
Tom?
The act in
Jack
itself is
wants to
evil, right? I
say,
got you. I got
Jack
you.
wants to say, you want to overtalk me? Jack wants to say, because the summation, the sum is positive, Jack wants to say, all things considered, that negative integer is positive. That's ridiculous.
I didn't say
Well, you're
anything
just
about
talking about two
negative
different
integer.
senses, right? Isn't that what's happening, Jack? He's just
I don't
equivocating.
even know what he's talking about. He keeps bringing up these numbers and stuff. I never said anything about
Oh, is he
numbers or
doing the quadratic
integers.
equation thing again? Like as if that
Yeah,
like it was going to elucidate with him, like talking about numbers and integers
yeah,
and negatives and
yeah.
yeah, okay, that's
That's what
dumb.
he's doing. But what we have to do is just force him to see if he agrees given certain language, right? So, God determining that Khalil do that was in all things considered good, right? God determining Khalil to rape a
No,
child
God,
was in all things
that's
considered good.
not correct. That's not correct, Jack. God, right, determining, right, that the negative integers would be part of the equation does
See, now
not
he's doing the
necessarily
integers
represent
thing again.
that the negative integer is positive or good. That's what you're trying to
So,
say.
is God determination, right? That's an action. undertaken by God, right?
God determined that negative integer, which is evil, would be present
What was my question?
in the equation.
What was my question?
Just
what was
because
my
the
question?
summation,
What was my question?
meaning
You
all
think I'm
things
going to drop the
considered,
question?
is
You think
positive.
I'm going to drop my
Once
question?
again, it does not necessitate that integer that God had planned and determined for it to be in the equation magically somehow becomes positive. God determined that evil, that negative, that darkness, that absence of good would be in the equation for all things to be considered for the positive result.
Is that an answer to my question?
Absolutely.
What was my question?
Well, basically your statement was such that the things that God permits are all things considered good, which is ridiculous, sir.
I asked you a question. What was the question?
And if your question was such that all things considered, is this good that God permitted, right? We understand that God permits what? And you seem to fail to recognize what's being permitted here. God permits evil. And you don't seem to grasp that God permits evil. Because why is it evil? Because it has nothing to do with God's permission. Otherwise, everything that God permits would be good. But no, we say God permits evil, and it's not a contradictory statement. It's not oxymoronic. It is that God permits evil.
What was my question?
So I'm pretty much done. I can drop my mic, and I'll just go to playing poker.
Yeah, go fuck yourself, you fucking dishonest piece of garbage. Right? I asked you a fucking simple question, which was whether God's determination of things is an action, you fucking asshole. Right? And that's a yes or no fucking question, you fucking asshole. Right? You didn't answer the fucking question. Right? So if God determining things is an action, right, you fucking asshole, then when you say it's not in all things considered good for God to determine something, you're just saying that some of God's actions are not all things considered good.
So, I mean, that's a very simple situation. God permits...
Now you're talking again?
Evil actions, Jack.
Now you're
God
talking
permits
again?
evil actions.
Are you
but
talking again?
Let's not pretend that evil
again?
actions by the agent
Are you talking
is
again?
the act of God permitting. God permitting is a
again?
separate action.
You're talking again?
God permitting is a
again?
separate action.
You're talking again?
So God permitting action.
You're talking again?
God permits evil actions by the agent. And so you were trying to say there's only one act going on here, right? And so you want to determine whether this it is evil as if there's only one action. That is not correct. God permits, that's an action. God permitting is an action. Evil actions by, and that's a separate action by the creature. God permits these separate actions by the creature, and that in and of itself is an action, a separate action. Two different actions, Jack.
You talking again, John? So now that you're talking again, what's the answer to my question? Was a yes or no question, John? Yeah, you dishonest piece of garbage. So you just contradicted yourself, right? When you said God determining Khalil to rape a child is not in all things considered good, right? As if something that God does, right, a perfectly good being, could not be all things considered good. Dishonest piece of garbage. Yeah, you're not opening your mouth again, are you? Think I'm going to let you dodge that question?
Do you think he actually thinks that he like somehow like rebutted what you were saying, Jack? Do you think that's like actually what's going through his head right now?
No, he just has to. He has this sort of like, you can think of it as something like a neurotic compulsion. He has to actually be on record saying something, right, that at least appears to contradict what I'm saying. It's like the same phenomenon when, even if nobody's listening, he has to finish what he's saying, right? Even if nobody can hear him, he has to keep talking until he's finished saying what he's saying. But he understands that he's been caught in a contradiction, which is why he shut his fucking mouth. Because he knew that I wasn't going to drop the question as to whether determination was an action and whether any action that God undertakes is not in all things considered good. He knows he's caught. So the only reason why he piped up again was he thought that he could derail what I said by saying some other garbage, right? As if I wouldn't repeat the question that he was dodging. That's the same reason why he overtalks me, right? It's just one more dishonest tactic. Same reason why he doesn't answer the fucking question, right? Just says a bunch of other irrelevant bullshit.
Jack, I'm kind of a moron on this, so real fast, what is the contradiction, really quick, if you wouldn't mind, in a couple sentences?
Yeah, I asked him whether God determining Justin to rape a child was in all things considered good. And he said no. So I asked him if it's the case that God's determining some event to occur is an action undertaken by God, right? And he wouldn't answer that question. Because, of course, if he said yes, right, it is an action, then I would just ask him whether God ever undertakes an action that is not all things considered good. And the answer has to be no, right? But then that's inconsistent with him saying that God's determining Khalil to rape a child was not in all things considered good. That's the contradiction. Every action that God undertakes is in all things considered good. God determining Khalil to rape a child is an action God undertakes. Every action that God undertakes is in all things considered good. So he's contradicting himself by saying that was not in all things considered good.
I see, thank you.
Jack's trying to pretend that God permitting, right, is the same thing as the creature acting in sin. So
No, I don't
what's
think that
going
at
on
all.
is what's going on is God permitting. That's an action. God God is acting to permit an action. And so what Jack is trying to say is that there's only one act going on here. And so he wants to say, is that act good, quote unquote? And that's not what's going on. So the action of the creature is evil. And so we always claim it's evil. It's never the case that this action is good, ever, ever. Now, God permitting is a separate action. So what do we say? The act of God permitting evil to come to pass, determining evil to come to pass, ordaining, right, causally determining. We don't have a problem with any of that language. That action by God to permit evil actions is good. Now, evil actions remains evil actions, but Jack is trying to say that we want to, what is it good, and so the act of God permitting is not the action of itself by the creature.
Yeah, so when God causally determines an event, is that an action? Is that an action God undertakes?
Yes, it's an action that is separate from the creature's evil actions.
Okay. So God does God ever undertake an action that's not in all things considered good?
All of God's actions, in this case, ordination, permission, whichever way you want to look at it, is good. But once again,
It,
though, that action is not to be conflated with the act of the sinful agent, because they are acting separately and evilly and in disobedience to God, and that particular action can never be characterized as good. It's always
Not an
evil.
answer to Jack's question, John.
yeah, so the question is, does every action that God undertakes, is that in all things considered good? That's a yes or no question.
Yes, and all actions that God undertakes is not to be misunderstood as the evil actions of the agent.
So when I asked you, was God determining Khalil to rape a child in all things considered reason, and you said no,
No, I
you're
told you
just
that I did not
contradicting
say
what you said
no.
now.
I piped up and said no is not what I said, Jack.
You said it wasn't. I asked you if it was, and you said no.
God permitting, as you already know, Jack, everything that God permits is good. All of God's
Didn't say anything
actions are
about
good,
permission. I
right?
didn't say anything about permission.
What do
Right?
you think permission is? It's an
I
action.
asked you.
Do you agree that permission's an action,
I
Jack?
asked you. I
Do
asked
you
you.
agree that permission's an action?
So, you gonna keep over talking me, John?
So permission, right, is an action. It's an action by God and God alone.
You
It's
think I'm
not
gonna drop the question?
permission can never be acted upon by the agent, ever.
You think I'm gonna
And so
drop the question?
all of God's actions, which include permission, right, is good. Now, if you're looking at the sinful creature, right, disobedience to God, right, acting apart from the prescriptive will of God, uh, acting apart from the nature of God's goodness, all of these actions are evil. And so the creature's actions, once again, is not to be confused with the permissive actions of God, two separate actions. So God's permission is always good, always, without fail, always good. However, the actions of the creature, they may be evil, they may be good, but whether God permits it has absolutely no bearing on whether that action by the creature, which may be good or may be bad, irrespective of God's permission, is evil. And so, in the case of Khalil Allah's actions, right, we believe that he's rightfully guilty. Then,
Talk
then
about
those actions
filibuster.
are
Jeez.
evil. Those actions are always evil,
He's
Jack.
just gonna ask
Hey,
you the same
John,
question, man. Let
However,
let go.
can I ask a
God
quick question?
permitting
No,
is a separate action.
let Jack do what he's been patiently waiting to do.
What I just wanted to know. I just wanted to know if John thought that if an action could be taken without God allowing it, is it possible for that action to be good?
Yeah. So the action, right? Even if it's never acted, right? It can be good. So in
It
other
would be a
words,
non-determined
uh,
action, right? Like a non-determined, non-allowed. Like God
yeah.
didn't have
So
anything to
so
do with it. It took place
yeah.
outside of
So
God.
that's why I gave the example of feeding the homeless. Feeding the homeless, that action is good, irrespective of whether God permits it or not. Just because you intended to feed the homeless, let's say, and God did not permit it, does not necessarily mean that that action is evil, based upon God's permission. Equally so, just because somebody murdered some homeless person, right? God's permission doesn't magically make it good. It's always evil, like I said, right? And so God's permission has absolutely no bearing on whether we understand the killing of the homeless person, a murder, in fact, right? Unjustified killing is good or evil, has absolutely no bearing on God's permission, which is a separate action, because the act of permitting is not murder in and of itself.
What's the point of giving him a few more minutes to dodge with?
Yeah, I'm sorry, Jack.
Yeah. So John, are you done over talking me?
I didn't realize I was over talking you.
You didn't realize you were over talking me, you fucking lying piece of garbage?
That's right.
Yeah, stop over talking me, asshole. So now when you said that, when I asked you, is God determining Khalil to rape a child in all things considered good, and you said no, right? That would mean that some action that God undertook is not in all things considered good. But I just asked you, stop over talking me, asshole. I asked you a few minutes ago whether every action that God undertakes is in all things considered good, and you said yes.
That's correct.
Right? So you fucking contradicted yourself, you fucking piece of garbage.
Never
Right? And I was trying to
myself.
point that out. Oh yeah, so when you said no, it's not in all things considered good for God to determine Khalil to. Yeah, you did say no, you fucking asshole.
No, I did not.
Yeah, you did say no, you fucking asshole.
You were asking about Khalilullah's actions.
No, I asked you no. I didn't, you fucking asshole. I asked you whether God determining Khalil to rape a child was in all things considered good.
Yes.
And you said no, you fucking asshole.
Yes, it's always been yes, Jack. Are you confused as to my position that it is yes and it's always been yes?
So why did you fucking say no? Why'd you say no?
There's not a point.
Why'd you say no?
If you want to pretend
why'd you say
you
no?
have a gotcha, you know
why
my
did you say no?
is yes.
Why did you say no?
Not only
why
months,
did you
but
say
years.
no?
I've not only said it for years, but decades. It's always been good, right?
Yeah. So why'd you say no?
Every permissive act that God does is good. Even the evil actions that God permits. Are they evil? Yes. Are they good magically all of a sudden in terms of God's permission? No. But yet, the act of God permitting, not the evil action of itself, but the act of God permitting is and always will be good without fail.
Yeah, so why'd you say no, asshole?
I didn't. The question.
You did. You fucking did, you fucking asshole.
Check the replay,
you did say
Jack.
no.
Check the replay.
Yeah, we'll check the replay.
Your question was focused on Khalilullah's actions.
No,
and that
I asked
no.
you. No, you fucking asshole. I specifically asked
Check
you whether God determined. Shut your mouth.
Check the replay.
Whether God. Shut your mouth. Are you going to keep over talking me, John? Are you going to keep over talking me, John?
Remember when he was telling me
no,
here that I have an
over
talking problem, Jack?
You.
Yeah, okay. So, back to what I was saying before, right? On your view, God determining Khalil to rape a child. What were you going to say, Tom?
Oh, I was saying, do you remember earlier how he was telling me that I have an over-talking problem? Remember that?
Right. Yeah. So on John's view, every action that God undertakes is in all things considered good. Right?
That's right.
Yeah, and so when I asked him specifically, right, whether God determining Khalil to rape a child was in all things considered good, right, and he said no.
I actually said yes, Jack.
Right.
And I still
no, you didn't
stand
say
by
fucking
that position.
yes.
Now, you could either deal with what I'm telling you now or pretend there's some sort of contradictory answer when you know damn well, Jack, that my answer's been yes for weeks, months, today, decades, Jack. And so you can either try to pretend there's some sort of gotcha or deal with what's being given to you, which is yes, everything that God does, including the permission, is good.
Yeah,
act
okay.
of permission, not
yeah,
what is
now,
permitted, not what is permitted, Jack, but the act of permitting. Two different things.
Yeah, now, if we understand evil as what's impermissible, right, God could not permit the impermissible.
Yeah,
right?
I don't understand that to be permitted. This is like I try to tell you, Jack. This is what Darth Arianis has been trying for weeks and months, and I've been catching him on that. I'm surprised. I don't know if he got it from you or if you're stealing from him, but this permissibility, right? Permissible, in other words, it's not. It has absolutely nothing to do with God permitting, right?
Yeah, so I'm just talking about moral impermissibility. Do you understand what that is?
God permits things.
Do you understand what I mean by moral impermissibility?
God permits things he prescribes not to do.
Do you understand what I mean by moral impermissibility?
Do you understand what that means, Jack?
No,
God
I'm not
permits,
asking you that.
In other words, for example, let's say a father says, "Do not go outside, my child," and that parent permits that child to disobey him and go outside. That does not mean that the parent is permitting that child. Uh, uh, that doesn't mean that the act itself is permissible, because the parent actually said, "Do not go outside," meaning that it is not permissible to go outside.
Is that an answer to my question?
Two different ways of understanding it, Jack.
Is that an answer to my question?
Yeah, obviously you have nothing but questions. You can't even engage with the response. You always have questions rather than dealing with the statements that are being given to you.
So it wasn't an answer to my question?
Yeah, you don't find me asking you stupid questions like you find yourself asking every other people you interact with. All you have, Jack, you don't have what's called a cogent rebuttal. You have what's called a stupid question.
So it wasn't an answer to my question, is that right?
Yeah, I already told you I'm not going to engage you in your questions. This is not a Q&A, Jack.
Yeah, okay. So then shut your fucking mouth, asshole. Right? If you're not going to answer the fucking question.
That's right.
Right? Since you don't know what I mean, you don't know what I mean by moral impermissibility, you fuckhead. Right? So if we understand moral impermissibility. Oh yeah, what do I mean by it?
You're saying that if God permits it, then it's permissible.
I'm asking what I mean by moral. What do I mean by moral? No, I'm asking you, what do I mean by moral impermissibility?
What you're saying is that which is not permissible, right? In other words, you're saying that it's contradictory to say that God can permit that which he commands not to do. Of course God can permit, because you want to pretend that which God is claiming that God is prescribing for you not to do, that you want to characterize that as impermissible, as if God cannot permit the impermissible. If he permits, it's permissible. This is your argument. This is what's lame, in a sense that yes, God can easily permit that which he tells you not to do, and there's no contradiction there whatsoever.
Yeah, so what do I mean by moral impermissibility?
Yeah, I've already answered you, sir.
Did anybody understand his answer?
No.
You don't understand, Jane, that God permits.
He wants to say that.
God
he wants to say. He wanted to say. He wants to say.
Not to do.
Jackie, he said that you are trying to say that if it's impermissible, that if it was somehow morally impermissible, then God couldn't do it. And he's just saying that just because it's morally impermissible, God can still do it.
God can still permit it.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. So it's just morally impermissible. God can permit morally impermissible things, is what you're saying.
Sure. Because the permissibility is understood in two different ways. And so if you want to just make it simply, yes, God can and does permit, allow that which is morally impermissible. Sure.
Yeah, so did I say anything about two different ways?
It's supposed to be Jack's view. Remember, John? You're still man Jack.
Did I say anything about two different ways, John?
Let me repeat myself for the slow. God can and does permit, allow that which is morally impermissible.
Yeah, using morally impermissible in my sense? Using morally impermissible in my sense, dumb fuck? Are you using morally impermissible in my sense, dumb fuck, or are you equivocating on morally impermissible?
Yeah. All right. So as I say, if we understand morally impermissible in my sense, right, God can't permit to happen what is morally impermissible, right, in my sense, right? If you equivocate on morally impermissible and you have it mean something like chocolate cake, right, then maybe it is the case that God can permit morally impermissible in the second sense, the sense that I'm not using, the chocolate cake sense, right? But I never said anything about chocolate cake, right? Because I'm not using morally impermissible in that sense, right? So if you understand morally impermissible in my sense, right, the normative sense, well, then God, right, being perfectly good in the normative sense, right, and all powerful, cannot, right, cannot permit something impermissible to occur, morally impermissible to occur, right, in the normative sense, the non-equivocal sense, right, and therefore it
God,
follows. Yeah, you're
Jack,
speaking up again. You're speaking
God
up again, John.
God can and does permit that which He commands you not to do. It's as
Yeah.
simple as that.
So you're speaking up again. So how come you didn't answer my question?
And so, yeah, Zeleni's correct in text. God permits evil.
Yeah.
You want
So
to characterize evil as impermissible, and therefore God permits the impermissible. And God cannot do that. In essence, what you're saying through sophistry and word games is that God cannot permit evil. Of course, God can permit evil and does permit evil.
yeah. So when you say sophistry and word games, what does that mean?
It means that you want to pretend that God cannot permit evil. Of course, He can, and He does.
Yes. When I say that God cannot permit evil, right? Are you equivocating on evil? Gone quiet again, John? Yeah. So since John has gone quiet again, right? Yeah, I'm not talking about the equivocal chocolate cake sense of evil, where God can permit evil in the chocolate cake sense, right? Because I never said anything about fucking chocolate cake, you dumb fuck, right? So if we understand evil in the normative sense, right, and we understand moral impermissibility in the normative sense, so that what's evil, right, is morally impermissible, and vice versa, right, then it's not going to be the case that God, a perfectly good being in the normative, non-chocolate cake sense, right, and an all-powerful being, could ever permit the impermissible. That would be a contradiction. And so therefore, when I said that John's view is that Khalil raping a child, if that is what happened, would be in all things considered good, nothing that John said contradicted that. All he did was equivocate. And every time I ask him, when he says something that seems to contradict what I've said, are you equivocating on that term? Evil, impermissibility, what have you, right? He dodges.
Yeah, I do not define evil as that which is unpermissible. You do.
Yeah, I
I
didn't
don't.
ask you. I didn't ask you, right, whether you define it that way. Did I ask you that, you fucking idiot? Did I ask you if you define it that way, you fucking piece of garbage? Did I say you define it that way, you fucking piece of garbage? Obviously, we're talking about my definitions, you fucking piece of garbage. And according to my definitions, right? The normative concepts, right? On your view, Khalil raping a child is in all things considered good, assuming it happened. You can use your chocolate cake language and say, oh, well, if you understand good to mean chocolate cake, it's not a piece of chocolate cake that Khalil raped a child. Therefore, it's not in all things considered good because it's not in all things considered chocolate cake. Yeah, that's fine. Nobody's talking about that, you fucking idiot.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye, Des. Bye-bye. Bye-bye.